The Esports World Cup, or EWC, was directly announced by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman back in October 2023 and will be the premier esports tournament taking place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in summer of 2024, and will be the direct replacement tournament for Gamersgate that started in 2022. But also, EWC acquired their name and brand from the Electronic Sports World Cup, or ESLFaceit, which is a legendary tournament that my boomer ass remembers back in the early 2000s during their Counter-Strike 1.6 days. So the EWC is a tournament comprised of several different games from Apex Legends to Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2, Fortnite, League of Legends, Overwatch 2, Rainbow Six Siege, Street Fighter 6, StarCraft 2, and many more. The prize pool for the entire tournament is over $60 million spread across all the titles. Okay, so now that you know what's going on, what's the big deal? Why is everybody upset about this? Well, Saudi Arabia has a pretty awful human rights record, and we'll get into that later, but this video should serve as a good primer of all things Saudi Arabia and esports, answering such questions as, what does it even mean that the Saudi government is involved in esports? Why is the Saudi government doing this in the first place? And why are Western esports fans calling this sports washing and don't seem to like this kind of shift of power? Well, buckle up. Let's go into a deep dive. To explain the direct involvement of Saudi Arabia, we need to look at the Saudi PIF, or Public Investment Fund. The PIF is an initiative created by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS. He's the heir to the Saudi throne after King Salman, but he's currently already running the country. And with his new idea of the PIF, it's meant to revitalize Saudi Arabia and essentially wean the country off of oil by investing into different industries. We all know the world is becoming less reliant on oil, and if Saudi Arabia doesn't pivot, the country will be left behind. So to that end, Saudi Arabia is doing some crazy shit with the PIF, such as building mega cities like Oxagon, a city that floats entirely on water, Sindala, a remote island for rich people to park their yachts, Trojena, a fucking ski resort in Saudi Arabia, The Line, a 105-mile long city built in a line instead of a square, which has been rumored to be reduced to 1.5 miles. Who knew there was a reason city planners don't build cities in a line? So for a quick comparison of why the PIF is actually a good idea, oil makes up about 40% of Saudi Arabia's GDP, and meanwhile, oil and gas make up 20% of Russia's GDP, and semiconductors make up 15% of Taiwan's GDP. All of these countries are famous for one major export, but as you can see, Saudi Arabia is by far the worst offender of not diversifying their portfolio. Almost as offensive as calling Taiwan a country. Additionally, Saudi Arabia has already been investing into other sports, namely F1, with reportedly trying to purchase the rights to the sport, and also sponsoring F1 with their state-backed oil company Aramco. Soccer, which they have hosted several major soccer tournaments, and golf, hosting the LIV Golf tournament, a yearly tournament similar to the PGA Tour. This is of course called sports washing, that is, using sports to wash over atrocities conducted by a government or group of people. But let's take a look at something a bit less sinister in terms of governments washing influence over the broader world. The Thailand government in 2002 launched the Global Thai Program, which gave out grants to Thai investors so that they could create restaurants in other countries. They even have a 3-tier program which allows investors to choose between opening a Thai fast food joint, a mid-tier dining, or a fine cuisine restaurant. sport. This allows Thailand to export their cuisine to other countries and therefore export their culture abroad. South Korea has also done this in 2009 with their World Institute of Kimchi, spending $77 million to export their cuisine. This is called culinary diplomacy. So you may be wondering, okay, but why invest in esports and gaming? Well, as we've all heard repeatedly, the gaming industry is larger than the movie and music industry combined, so it's not a bad bet. Esports in particular isn't to be confused with gaming though. It's a small subsection of gaming and only for the most hardcore gamers. But the key thing is, Saudi Arabia is fucking hot as hell in the summer, as we all know. So outside sports aren't an option and tourism is low in the summer months. So naturally, esports would fill this niche. In a press release from the Esports World Cup, they said, during the summer, Saudi Arabia experiences an average 16% drop in hotel occupancy rates, an 18% decrease in tourism spending, and a 13% drop in restaurant and cafe spending. It's actually quite a smart idea. Okay, so now you know why Saudi Arabia is investing in other areas, but how exactly are they doing it? The PIF purchased the ESLFaceit group for $1.5 billion in 2022. For a comparison of just how insane that is, Twitch was bought by Amazon for $970 million. ESL are most well known for hosting CSGO majors, using the famous Intel Extreme Masters and DreamHack brands as their platforms. But they've also hosted for all major esports titles such as Dota 2, League of Legends, Valorant, and if you want to go back far enough, StarCraft. ESL are the pioneers of high production esports tournaments in the West. Faceit is of course bundled in with this sale. Faceit is a mostly online tournament platform with a rigorous anti-cheat, which is most well known for providing protection to its online Counter-Strike league. Now with the takeover of the PIF owning ESLFaceit and the head chairman of the PIF being Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, remember MBS for short, now you can see how the government owns ESL and Faceit. Now, if some of that confused you a bit, that's by design. I also simplified it by saying the PIF owns ESLFaceit, but really it's a shell company called Savvy Gaming Group, with the chairman of that also being MBS. Okay, still confused? I know it's hard to keep track of, so here's a nifty chart showing all relevant ties within esports and Saudi Arabia. As you can see, the Saudi government has created several shell companies, from the non-profit Esports World Cup Foundation to strong ties with the recent creation of several esports federations. As I also said before, the Esports World Cup is the upfront way for Saudi Arabia to enter the world of esports, hosting a $60 million tournament spread across multiple titles, and more importantly, out of that $60 million prize pool, 20 million of that will go towards esports organizations that place the highest in several different titles. This allows the organizations themselves to win money rather than just the players winning the prize money. And so 30 teams have joined this tournament, much to the chagrin of several esports fans. Okay, so now that you know what Saudi Arabia is doing to join esports, why are Western fans so upset? Well, here comes the human rights issues I was talking about earlier. Alright, quick pause before we get into the real shit. You may be wondering who I am. My name is Izento, and I've been watching esports since 2006 and working in it since 2017. I create League of Legends documentaries, investigative features, articles, and video opinion pieces. If you enjoy this, please subscribe, as that helps me continue making this type of deep dive work. Thanks, and back to the video. So currently, Saudi Arabia is fighting a war against the Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis are designated as a global terrorist group according to the US government, and they have been causing havoc in the Red Sea, attacking cargo ships in protest of the war in Gaza in reaction to the attacks on October 7th, 2023. And these Red Sea attacks have been causing global trade disruption, as the entrance to the Red Sea that goes to the Suez Canal, which, if you don't know, is responsible for 15% of all global trade, which is trillions of dollars. So now the problem becomes Saudi Arabia are bombing indiscriminately on Yemeni civilians.
Like in Yemen, Iranian-backed Houthi fighters say at least 31 people, including women and children, have died in an attack on their vehicles in the western province of Hadida, although some Houthi sources say the number of dead is lower.
Dead children and women, disgusting crime.
Which is now causing one of the biggest humanitarian crises in the world, along with a myriad of other problems in Yemen, such as a civil war, control for government power, and a proxy war between the Iranian-backed Houthis and Saudi Arabia having a vested interest in the government of their nearby close neighbors. Saudi Arabia has close ties with the US government and is currently being sold US weapons contracts, which they're using on the Yemeni people, but we'll get back to that later in this video. Then, of course, there's the issue of women's rights, that in 2017, they were given the right to drive in Saudi Arabia, which you could call progression, but that just shows how far behind the country is in terms of equal rights towards women. Ironically, the woman who fought for driving in Saudi Arabia, Manal al-Sharif, had to flee the country because she drove before the law came into effect, and she was arrested during her first attempts to drive.
So this time I asked my brother to come with me and drive by a police car. It went fast. We were arrested, signed a pledge not to drive again, released, arrested again. He was sent to detention for 1 day, and I was sent to jail.
Another woman named Loujain al-Hathloul was sentenced to 6 years in prison in 2018 after the law allowed women to drive legally under charges of terrorism. Additionally, they have historically had issues with what the country calls their male guardianship laws. Currently, the personal status law requires women to obtain permission from their male guardian to marry, typically their male guardian being their father, and women are required to obey their husband in a reasonable manner, whatever that means. To add more absurdity, incarcerated women are required to obtain permission to leave prison even after they've completed their sentence, according to humanrightswatch.org. So these are the reasons why esports has a big problem with Saudi Arabia entering esports, as it's a very LGBT positive space, especially in certain scenes such as Overwatch or the FGC. Additionally, Saudi Arabia is a country that still conducts mass executions, with one of their more recent ones being in 2022, where they killed 81 men, many of them being Shia Muslim, which is a minority group in the country, and Sunni being the majority. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole Shia-Sunni thing, as it's quite religious and has to deal with a fundamental feud in Islamic history, but classically the Shias have been persecuted in Saudi Arabia for quite some time. Then in 2019, 5 men were convicted for homosexuality in the kingdom, which is punishable by death. Additionally, feminism is considered an extremist idea and is punishable by jail and flogging, and even atheism is illegal.
When you look at the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia, for example, there are some would say some bizarre rulings. Why is advocating atheism in Saudi Arabia now considered to be a terrorist event? How do you explain that?
Well, because it is, in Saudi Arabia, we are a unique country. We are the birthplace of Islam. We are the country that hosts the 2 holiest sites for Muslims in Mecca and Medina. We are the country that is based on Islamic principles and so forth. We are a country that is homogeneous in accepting Islam by the entire population. Any calls that challenge Islamic rule or Islamic ideology is considered subversive in Saudi Arabia and would be subversive and could
terrorism?
lead to chaos.
Well, somebody who says, I don't believe in God and others shouldn't believe in God is the equivalent of Osama bin Laden?
Well, somebody who says that and calls for it publicly is subversive and could possibly be a terrorist, yes.
To add further confusion to Saudi Arabia, most of their laws are actually not penal codes, as in they aren't even written down. Most laws are enshrined in Sharia, meaning that it is heavily religious and also open to broad interpretation from the judge. This ironically allows Saudi Arabia supporters to displace blame, as things such as women driving were technically never illegal, but that's because they were never written down and it was always handled through Sharia law. And of course, as you all have probably heard, the Saudi government and MBS is responsible for calling the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, where they murdered the journalist at a Saudi consulate in Istanbul, where they hacksawed his body and carried him away in several unmarked suitcases. Alright, so while that was just a small glimpse of the human rights abuse by the Saudi government, and there's just no way I can cover them all in a single video, overall it seems like plenty of reasons to not like the Saudi government's involvement in esports. So let's also cover the most recent involvements of esports teams co-signing Saudi Arabia's new entry into esports. So we have to go back a bit actually, because Saudi Arabia had an earlier attempt to try and get into esports in 2020. NEOM, the megacity project of Saudi Arabia, tried to sponsor the LEC of League of Legends, the European League, and one of the 4 major regions within the esport. Casters and community figures spoke out about this sponsorship, both for the human rights abuse of the country of Saudi Arabia, but also the fact that an indigenous tribe called the Huwaitat were in the direct build path of NEOM's megacity project, The Line. So the Saudi government forced the tribe to move, and one man refused by the name of Abdul Rahim al-Huwaitat, where he was shot dead by Saudi authorities for allegedly opening fire on security forces. Riot rescinded the sponsorship deal with NEOM and even gone out to say internally that they did nothing wrong except maybe the communication process, according to an internal leak by esports journalist Richard Lewis. Since the broken deal of NEOM, Riot have deleted the evidence of the news posts on their website, which is just the beginning of the esports hypocrisy. As you all know, esports likes to appear to endorse LGBT beliefs, with the same companies posting gay pride during the month of June, and even having communities like the Rainbow Rioters, a group within Riot Games trying to justify their contradictory beliefs within the company, with a report from esports journalist Richard Lewis revealing internal messages within the company's pro-gay leadership saying, "We try to meet the country where their viewpoints are at," yet simultaneously works for a company that is giving the media rights to the Esports World Cup and Saudi Arabia, where they kill gay people for being gay. And yet these same companies continue to celebrate gay pride in their safe countries of the likes of USA, Ireland, Germany, etc. Additionally, several esports organizations that have promoted LGBT values, which has hilariously spawned a meme of Saudi-based Team Falcons with a fan making a celebratory gay pride image of the team's logo. On a more serious note, in April 2022, Team Liquid's co-CEO Steve R. Hansen made a tweet condemning recent actions surrounding the state of Texas and abortion laws with Roe v. Wade, saying he can't just ignore the ongoing and atrocious actions of local leadership towards the LGBT community, going to do our part. They then made a video about how they would donate to the ACLU of Texas, ironically given that the Saudi state doesn't even consider a child's mother as their legal guardian, let alone allow them to get an abortion. And Team Liquid recently, through cognitive dissonance, started celebrating gay pride as of June 1st, 2024 by allowing fans to showcase their pride. FlyQuest, a team known for their League of Legends team and an organization that has historically touted gay pride and LGBT rights, albeit with their previous owner Trisha, have now reversed course and put out a tweet saying that they are allowing any of their players to decline participating in the Esports World Cup. The community, of course, caught on to this, especially the League of Legends LCS community, saying that this puts even more pressure on the players to play, lest they let their teammates down by not participating in a 5v5 team game. Heroic, a team known for their Counter-Strike roster, sent out a tweet about having gay sex for Pride Month of June 1st, 2024, but have since deleted both a gay sex tweet and even a softcore version of kissing the homie tweet. I'm sure that scored well with the kids, bro. But these esports orgs are now joining the EWC, with recent tweets even promoting the tournament and coincidentally possibly violating FTC regulation without notifying their audience of clear advertisement for the tournament's promotion, according to an article published by esports journalist James Fudge. This is, of course, just additional evidence that several esports organizations themselves know what they're doing is both morally juxtaposed to their previously stated values, and they are earning an undisclosed six-figure payout for endorsing the tournament on social media and participating in the EWC itself. Several organizations have also picked up new players just to participate in the EWC, hoping to fight for their share of the $20 million segmented from the overall $60 million prize pool, as once again, this is given to the organizations that place the highest among several different esports titles. In just the past few weeks, the likes of Cloud9 have re-entered Rocket League, as well as signed multiple Street Fighter 6 players. NRG have announced their return to Apex Legends. Team Vitality have signed a female Mobile Legends team, along with Fnatic. These are just some of the many rosters that have cynically been picked up just for the Esports World Cup. Okay, let's quickly go over some key points and common pitfalls of logic here when discussing Saudi Arabia and esports. It's esports winter. Surely the esports organizations need money, right? Realize that although we narrowly dodged a world recession because of COVID, esports winter is not just because of that, but rather because esports organizations have flagrantly tossed money as if they have the greed is good cheat code on. Shout out if you know, you know. Esports orgs have caused the disease and are now justifying the cure of taking Saudi money in the face of their proclaimed moral superiority. Well, what about China and Riot Games? Yes, true, Tencent is the owner of Riot Games, and as we all know, the Chinese Communist Party has direct control over Tencent, even forcing the company to pay $7.7 billion for common prosperity. And if you know anything about corporations, they hate taxes, no matter what nationality they are. Yes, they're detaining and possibly even killing Uyghur Muslims in their far western regions, but they're also not nearly as tough on LGBT rights as Saudi Arabia, as of course that country has executed people for gay sex. Also, China aren't directly funding a tournament, nor pouring cash in to help bolster an entire industry. They're a couple more degrees separated from esports than the Saudi government is. Okay, well, the US has done terrible things to civilians in other countries. This is also true. In particular, the drone striking campaign from the Obama administration has killed several innocent civilians in the Middle East. Previously, the Bush administration launched a false war with the war in Iraq, claiming weapons of mass destruction, which were never found, by the way, with the US military also depleting uranium rounds in the war, which has caused mass birth defects in Iraq. The US is also allies with the Saudi government and providing weapons for their war in Yemen, as well as launching attacks of their own. Yes, we all know the stories, or at least now you do. The problem is, The US government is not directly hosting an esports tournament, nor are they completely restructuring parts of their GDP plan to support it. In fact, in some ways, they're actively against esports, with our presidents historically condemning video games and saying they cause violence, from the days of the Columbine shooting in 1999, which spawned the very first government campaigns against video games, to as recent as 2019, with Trump blaming video games for a mass shooting.
Second, we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence.
The US Air Force has also sponsored CSGO tournaments in the past, but Western voices have also been very critical of that as well. So don't worry, the average gamer US citizen hates the US government just as much as they hate your Saudi government. So with all of that above board, currently the Esports World Cup is slated for July 4th and will run until August. Thanks for watching, happy Gay Pride Month for those who celebrate it, and peace.